permit him to arrest people without charge and trial. Surprised?
Not only not surprised, he arrested a couple of students in my program at Columbia University. ICE did, just grabbed them out of their dormitories and put them in detention for months. One with a wife that was 8 months pregnant, and just grabbed this student and took him away. So this is the kind of behavior that we saw. We saw, of course, ICE out on the streets militarizing our cities, terrorizing people and killing people. So I'm not surprised at all that such things were debated and in some sense probably continue to be debated.
Yeah. The only surprise I have is he didn't try and pull it off. Apparently, some folks persuaded him that the courts would never allow it, though, as you point out, it did happen to your students.
Yeah.
I'm going to gather they're not Americans, but we're here on a perfectly lawful federal government issued student visa.
And one with the green card. So, in other words, the right to work and married to an American citizen, it was and remains something absolutely shocking. This has been our reality for the last couple of years. We know there are people in the White House who have told us that they're not restrained by the niceties of law. They are doing what they think they can get away with.
Those niceties would be the document they took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend, called the Constitution.
Well, we don't hear too much reference to that now, do we, after all?
No.
What we've had is rule by executive decree. Typically, the courts get around after some weeks or months or a year or two of knocking things down. Americans paid $140 billion that the households will never get back. Some businesses may get a windfall. That's for the tariffs that Trump imposed, for which he had no legal authority to impose those tariffs. Now, because those tariffs are being rebated, they're being rebated to the companies that passed along the tariff costs to households. The households aren't getting the money back, in, I suppose, in many or most cases. So we've ended up with the complete abuse of power and then a kind of boondoggle. And the American people pay the price for this.
You can't make this up. Whether you bought a Mercedes-Benz for $100,000 and paid $115,000, or whether you bought a toaster for $25 at Walmart and paid $30, you got to fight to get that money back. Mercedes-Benz is going to get it back, and Walmart is going to get it back, but you might never. That's
exactly the case. And this was predictable from the first moment and I predicted it from the first moment that I read the executive order that said, by the emergency powers vested in me as President of the United States. And then he invoked emergency powers that he doesn't have. I think people will be interested to know that when his tariffs were knocked down, he used a different clause and has put tariffs back on with powers that he does not have.
Correct.
So this has not exactly been an administration with fidelity to the rule of law.
Moving on to the news of today, to your understanding, Professor Sachs, are the United States and Iran about to enter into another 60-day ceasefire over the objection of Prime Minister Netanyahu? Do we know the terms? And wasn't the JCPOA a better deal?
Well, the JCPOA involves issues that aren't even on the table for the next 60 days, if I have exactly the calendar right. What is on the table right now is reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the U.S. and Israel went to war against Iran on February 28th. And now it may be open again thanks to this agreement. In other words, returning to the status quo ante. as we say, before there ever was a war. The nuclear issues, in which Iran will not get a nuclear weapon because they've said for 25 years, we don't want one. We already had that treaty, as you're pointing out, agreed 11 years ago, and Trump ripped it up 3 years after it was agreed in 2018. And this has been no end of grief of taking an agreement that would prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, ripping it up, and then getting into war over this, and then going back maybe to the terms of that agreement. So what we can say certainly is this war never should have happened. Second, it was based on absolutely delusional premises that this would be a one-day operation, kill the leadership, and Trump would choose the next leader. This was absolutely, as one of the observers at the time, as Trump was proclaiming this, thought absolutely farcical, which it was, but it's not just farcical, it's been tragic. Tens of billions of dollars of direct losses from American and Israeli bombing, thousands of people killed, worldwide damages many times larger than that because of the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz for months. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll get back to the status quo ante. Now, having said all of that, Israel wanted this war. Netanyahu said on the first day this was his dream for 40 years. He has wanted to overthrow the Iranian government basically for 40 years, and certainly for the 30 years that he, since he first became prime minister in Israel. And I think one of the only encouraging points of this agreement today is that the right-wing extremist politicians in Israel are having an absolute fit about it. And Netanyahu's allies are attacking Trump. This signals to me that this is something real. This is good. During the past week, Trump repeatedly used expletive-laced language attacking Netanyahu. That's also good. I don't think it was a charade. Maybe it's a bit of growing up of the American political system that we are maybe retaking our control away from the Zionist lobby, which I very much hope is the case.
So President Trump is in France. It's late in the day, as it is where you are. It's probably the same time. And he just told the press that the deal is all signed and the Strait of Hormuz is now partially opened. He was seated next to French President Macron when he said that. All we have is the headline. Chris is trying to get the actual video of him saying that. What did Iran get besides the cessation of violence and the movement away of the United States Navy? Did they get any of the billions that the U.S. has stolen from their bank accounts in America?
One thing to emphasize, which I think every person watching these events of the last few days knows, is that we've not had a definitive account of what has been signed. Second, what has been signed is absolutely provisional. Certain things happen at the beginning. Certain things are supposed to happen within the first 30 days. Other things are supposed to happen within the following 30 days. Other things yet are supposed to happen 30 days after that. And there is supposed to be some kind of final resolution on the main topic, if you will, of the nuclear portfolio 60 days from now. So they're supposed to enter into negotiations shortly upon the signing of this document. What did Iran get? It seems that there is some promise, some language that Iran will get some of its own money back. You can't make this stuff up. The United States government, as a business, seizes the money of countries it doesn't like. It did that with Russia, it did that with Venezuela, it did that with Iran, it did that with North Korea, it did that with Afghanistan. It's totally lawless behavior, by the way. It's just gangsterism. But Iran has tens of billions of dollars of its own money frozen in various parts of the world because the U.S. threatens to sanction any banks that deal with Iran regarding Iran's own money. So Iran has an account, say, in Dubai, or Iran has an account in India. But because of U.S. sanctions, Iran can't get its own money back. What seems to have been agreed is that something on the order of $25 billion of Iran's own money will be released in stages. The first 12 billion, if I understand from the media reports, will be released within the next 30 days. Now, $12 billion, it's not chump change, but for a country of more than 90 million people, it's not such a big deal, obviously, and it's Iran's own money. But as we know, and I think this is very important to understand, America runs a kind of gangster regime economically. We don't feel it, but if you are living in countries that the United States is trying to bring down, change government, cause regime change, like Venezuela or Cuba or Iran and many others, the U.S. still has the power, not the law, not the right, but the power to cause grave economic harm. And the U.S. caused an utter economic collapse in Venezuela. The United States has caused a catastrophic economic collapse in Cuba. And the United States has caused a real economic collapse, a pretty calamitous disaster in Iran. And our own Treasury Secretary, who I regard as a kind of mob enforcer, not a Treasury Secretary, told us in January in very explicit and joyful terms how the U.S. went out to break the Iranian currency, the Iranian banking system, and the Iranian economy last year, right. So-called maximum pressure, and he called it economic statecraft. I call it gangsterism, but in any event, Iran is responding to that even more, I would say, than it is responding to the American military. With the military, Iran retaliates, and it has a credible deterrent because it can fire missiles into U.S. military bases, to Israel when Israel attacks Iran or Iran's allies and so forth. But with these economic warfare tools, Iran has suffered and can't really or didn't really bring itself to bomb other countries to get those economic sanctions lifted. So that's where the U.S. had some pressure. It's not decisive pressure because the U.S. was also reeling from the last 3 months of stalemate, in that the U.S. was bringing down a lot of the world economy, and Trump was hearing from countries all over the world, you and Israel are wrecking the world economy. This needs to stop, as well as from the American voters who overwhelmingly hated this war. Right. So all in all, what I'm saying is that the U.S. didn't really have a military response, but it did use this economic warfare. And one of the things that Iran is supposedly getting is a little bit of its money back, if you can believe this. Right. So this is seemingly the story.
Wasn't Lebanon part of the deal?
So Lebanon, of course, we haven't seen the deal, but the Iranians said, and the Pakistani mediators have said that Lebanon is part of the deal. Israel brazenly invaded Lebanon. Let's understand this. Israel committed a genocide in Gaza. Israel is annexing the West Bank before our eyes, and Israel invaded Lebanon. It's not a pretty picture. Israel is a rogue state. Three of the top people in the government right now, the prime minister and two ministers, have arrest warrants out for them by the International Criminal Court. That's our ally, supposedly, until
Right.
at least the last few days. I'm hoping that Trump will do what he says, which is first, he told Netanyahu something very serious and very real. He said, everybody hates you, which is pretty much true. And he said, and everybody hates Israel, which is demonstrably true, according to the Pew opinion surveys done all over the world and released last month, which showed that Israel is despised for what it's doing, not because of anti-Semitism, that's absurd, but because of what Israel is doing, acting like a rogue state that can kill anyone, go to war anywhere, assassinate leaders, and think that this is somehow normal. By the way, Netanyahu's lead opponent right now, Naftali Bennett, who was a prime minister before, is quoted tonight, my time in Europe, as saying that the day there's a change of government in Israel is the day that the regime change war against Iran starts again.
Oh.
I'm paraphrasing, but just to say Netanyahu is despicable. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are despicable, but don't hold your breath for the opposition. It's not an opposition for peace. Netanyahu's being attacked. You weren't smart enough to continue the war to keep the United States on side in the war against Iran.
Here's
sorry to say it, just that Israel is a rogue state by any standard. And if Trump at least retakes American foreign policy from this rogue state, we can all be thankful at least for that.
Here is President Trump just literally a few minutes ago with President Macron in France.
It's signed, the deal's all signed, and the strait is already partially opened. As you know, they're doing a little hunting for a couple of mines that they've already found, but it's essentially ships are starting to go out now. On Friday, it'll be completely opened. I think it's going to be free sailing. We do want to see if we can straighten out the Lebanon thing, because it just seems to just never end. And that's a mini version of what we were doing, and it should not be tough. It should not be tough. So Hezbollah, we have to have a little talk with them.
What will Netanyahu do? And before you answer, here's how he answered that question earlier today. Chris, cut number 12.
Well, President Trump and I have known each other for many years. He is the President of the United States, and I am the Prime Minister of Israel. Many times we see eye to eye, and there are also cases where we see less eye to eye. I am responsible for Israel's security interests. I stand up for them, and I want to tell you how to stand up for them. You have to stand up for them not with belligerence. You have to do it wisely. And that requires a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, and a deep familiarity with the American arena. It requires a great deal of experience. I think I am doing this in the best possible way, and when necessary, I stand firmly for our security interests.
What will he do to wreck this deal if there is a legitimate deal between Iran and the U.S.? He knows he can't fight Iran alone. According to Larry Johnson, he wouldn't survive a week.
I think that's right. the United States has been complicit in every Israeli war, in every Israeli invasion of Lebanon, in the overthrow of the Syrian government, which was an initiative together with Israel, in the U.S. case led by the CIA, ordered by President Obama already back in 2012. So everything that Israel has done depends on the United States. And it depends on the United States in three ways. It depends on the United States militarily. It depends on the United States financially. And it depends on the United States diplomatically, because the U.S. has run diplomatic cover for Israel all along. The core of Netanyahu's governance for 30 years has been what's called Greater Israel. That means to block Palestinian rights, to block a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, to occupy and slaughter the Gazans, to occupy and kill the people on the west, the Palestinians on the West Bank, to occupy East Jerusalem, and to invade neighboring countries to make sure that they get away with this Greater Israel idea. It's been a complete disaster for everybody. Disaster for the Middle East, disaster for Israel, a disaster for the United States, which has been complicit in all of this. This cannot go on if the United States finally says stop. So whatever Netanyahu may want to do, if Trump sees this through, this step, he did the opposite on February 28th. He went along with Netanyahu in an absolutely delusional war against Iran that all the previous presidents knew not to get into, but Trump bought it, did it. It was a disaster. He's extricating himself, but he's realized perhaps in recent days Netanyahu is crazy, as he called him. I won't use the full expression because it's not something that anybody should say, much less the president of the United States. But in any event, if Trump retakes American foreign policy, then Israel does not have any options. It will stop no matter what the blustering and strutting and claims of the opposition or Netanyahu's side might make. They cannot continue their bloody-minded approach.
Last subject matter, Professor Sachs, which is akin to the first. When the New York Times reported that the Mossad spies on the White House, Mar-a-Lago, and they identified the various individuals, the story, as you so correctly pointed out, the story was the story. The fact that somebody went to the Times and verified it and the Times printed it. The story was not the spying. We all knew about the spying. We called up Sheriff David Hathaway, who's the sheriff of Santa Cruz County, California, but for 30 years was in senior management at the Drug Enforcement Administration. And I said, what do you know about the Mossad spying on the White House? He laughed. He goes, they spy on American law enforcement, all of it, from LAPD and NYPD down to small town law enforcement. And law enforcement knows it. Does this surprise you? And why would a foreign government spy on American domestic law enforcement?
Well, we know the answer to both questions. There's nothing surprising, and they do it in order to keep their hold on American foreign policy. The United States has followed this Israeli extremism for decades, for precisely at least for 30 years. And they use every method they can use. The United States does not operate with clean hands anywhere else. Let's be clear about that. This is a nasty business. It doesn't make us safe. It brings us closer to complete disaster in many parts of the world. It leads to open wars. It leads to all the disasters that we have. But this is Israel's behavior. Israel, absolutely, if it's going to survive, and that's a question mark, it needs to become a normal country. It needs to behave. It needs to understand that there are laws and rules and principles. It needs to stay out of American politics in this way, spying and bribing and doing whatever else, and big money in U.S. politics. It needs to stop this. The United States on its own needs to stop that. There are areas where, of course, if Israel were a normal country, there are many things that would be productive and mutually satisfactory. But this so-called Greater Israel project of Netanyahu, which goes back to his assuming the prime ministership 30 years ago, has been an absolute disaster. And maybe, I know I'm too optimistic, too hopeful, but maybe there's a glimmer of light that is saying the United States is freeing itself from this grip in these days. My God,